Welcome to the Flynn Effect podcast, where we dive deep into all things culture, industry news, and history, all with the goal of helping our clients to perform better. Okay, well, Kevin, Daniel Flynn.
That's me.
Welcome to the Flynn Effect podcast. Thank you for being our first guest.
Sure, good to be here.
Really appreciate it. I think when we get into the swing of this thing, we'll probably be doing some reactions to current cultural events, things like that. But for this first episode, I thought that it would make sense to talk a little bit about the history of the agency. And who better to do that than our longest running employee? How many years have you been involved in the agency?
Well, it started in 1981 as a one-year internship in between undergraduate school, and I wanted to go to graduate school. So I traced my roots back to 1981.
Okay, beautiful. And the agency has been around since 1967. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the founding and about Grandpa Jer for me, but your father.
Right, your grandfather, Jerry Flynn, started, he worked in the media business, and he was a well-known Toastmaster. He did a lot of public speaking, but he sold radio time and TV time, so he was well aware of the media kind of deal. And at some point, he decided, I want to put out my own shingle and do this on my own. So I remember, I think it was on the 7th floor of the Temple building in downtown Rochester, opened up a little office, not much bigger than the space we're in right now, and put it out there and got some accounts. He had automobile accounts, some retail accounts like Ridge Lumber.
Okay.
The Lanky Planky, the lumber number you should know, 266-7700.
Very memorable.
So, and R.C. Shaheen's. So he built a nice little business doing that kind of advertising, and was well respected and liked, and kept that going till around, I guess, 1980, when my older sister, Colleen, joined him, and they were basically a two-person shop. And at this time, the office was on 871 Monroe Avenue, really close to where 490 crosses over, in the basement of that building, because the rent was very, very reasonable. And again, more retail type accounts. And then I was graduating undergraduate in 1981, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I was pretty sure I wanted to go to graduate school and go back to Cornell for a master's degree. And I formulated this plan that I would go and get a master's in communications, but I needed some experience. So I thought a one-year internship at the agency would be a great start. And I was highly encouraged by my dad and Colleen, and they paid me, I don't like to brag, but it was a whopping $25 a week. Basically, it was gas money. And it was enough. It wasn't enough. So I had to also wait tables at night. So just paying your dues very early on in your career.
A little early hustling.
Yep. And so after that, I did, in fact, go to grad school, and I spent a year and a half there and got a master's in communications, and came back to 871 Monroe Avenue there, and back to the agency. And at that point, my dad really kind of wanted to retire. He still was going to do a little bit here and there, but mostly he wanted to retire. And so we engineered a 10-year buyout between Colleen and me.
Yeah.
And so he was a great cheerleader, and was basically, until the day he died. I always would lean on him for advice. And it's funny, after all these years since he's passed, there are times when I have a particular tricky little problem or issue, and I was like, boy, I wish I could ask my dad about this. But
I bet. We've been using a quote from Jerry in many of our new business conversations as of late, which was, "The difficult is no problem, the impossible might take us the weekend." And I believe you let us know that was something that he had said. Did he bring that spirit into the agency from the very beginning?
Yeah, we always the advertising business is deadline driven, as you know, so we were always working to get things done. So you never wanted to say no to a client. I mean, sometimes you have to, but by and large, we want to get stuff done and move the ball forward and help build our client's business. So super important to have that mindset.
Awesome. And so what year did Chris join you?
Now, I want to say he went through a similar program that I did.
Yeah.
I think in 1986, he
That's what I
started
have in
to
my head.
intern. Yeah, he interned with us. And I think he also worked a second job. And he was going to school at Brockport. He was finishing up, and we actually lived together.
Hmm.
I had the downstairs. It was a duplex. I had the downstairs apartment, and he had the upstairs apartment.
Yeah.
So we were pretty close.
I've seen the prank videos. I think those would get a lot of play on TikTok these days.
There's a famous garage door prank video that he
Yeah.
did that was very
We'll have to
successful.
dig that up.
Someday, yes, you should. That could be its own podcast, but he got me good.
Yeah.
So he joined in 86. And so the three of us worked together, Colleen, Chris, and myself. And for a short period of time, my brother Kerry did a little bit,
Yeah.
a stint with us. But, the business had its ups and downs. We had some successful years and some other years where we were sliding back. And so I think it was 1992. At that point, we were struggling as an agency. It's like, are we going to keep this thing going? We were, if you did a trial liquidation analysis, we certainly owed more money than we could take in, and we were sort of living on cash flow, which is always dangerous. And I think that summer of 92, my sister said, well, I think I'm going to opt out. And so she did and went into sales at a radio station. And then Chris and I were there. We're trying to make it work. And oh my gosh, should we close up shop? I think I sent out one resume looking for a real job somewhere, just one. And then we got a call to pitch this little sporting goods chain in Binghamton, New York. They had 7 stores. It was called Dick's Clothing and Sporting Goods. And we pitched it against the incumbent agency. I think they were named Roseanne Saul and Hart Conway, I believe, at the time. So the three of us went at it. Chris and I worked our butts off, came up with a spec campaign, a spec jingle, went down there and pitched like crazy in Binghamton and crossed our fingers. And we were hoping this might be the thing that got us out of our deep hole that we were in financially. And lo and behold, we were fortunate enough to win that business and figure it out. And as everyone knows, Dick's Sporting Goods has been one of America's great retail success stories.
Yeah.
And we were able to hang on to them for about 4 years. And during that time, Dick's grew rapidly, and we got to do some great creative. We hired Terry Bradshaw as a spokesperson, Jimmy Johnson, and others as well.
Yeah.
And I think during that 4 years, they were up to maybe about 75 stores. So it got us back to profitability, got us into the black, both personally and professionally. So Chris and I had a really good base. And then got a phone call. Well, we're going to go look at some other agencies. We think we need a bigger agency. So that was kind of a shock to the system. And we still pitched for it, and we did very well. And we came in second, which is first loser, as you know. But I think we impressed them that we hung in there, and I think that would pay dividends later on. So Chris and I needed to reinvent ourselves, and we were out there figuring out what we were going to do. We moved in with another agency for a period of about 3 months or so, trying to get our feet back on the ground and figure things out. And then lo and behold, Lou Angora and Ray Martino were in somewhat of a similar situation, and we had some meetings, and so that was a different agency. And they were like, what if we pooled our resources together? They were a little bit, we were good in broadcast and media buying and retail. They were better in some print and public relations. So it was a good synergy with those areas there. So February 1st of 1997, I believe it was, we came together. This was about 6 months or so after losing the Dick's Sporting Goods business. And from the get-go, that went really well. We ended up buying Lou out after about 9 months. We didn't always agree on everything. And so he wanted to stay a certain size, and we really wanted to grow. So we came to an amiable agreement and worked through that after 9 months. And so Chris, Ray, and I worked together as equal partners for 20 years and had a great run, and Ray retired in early 2017.
Yeah.
And also going back to the Dick's Sporting Goods stuff, our experience in the sporting goods category got us this client very early on when we were Martino Flynn for a company called Sneaker Stadium. And they were a really nice group of folks, and I think they had about 30 or 40 stores in New Jersey, New York, that area. And so So that business we held on to for a couple of years until they got bought out by another company. And then coincidentally, shortly thereafter, Dick's Sporting Goods called and said, we got a few projects we might like to work with you Flynn boys on. So got the call from Ed Stack, and we still do business with them right to this day, which is really good. But our whole client base got a lot more diverse. So getting Dick's Sporting Goods, I would say to people, the two best things that probably happened in my advertising career was winning the Dick's Sporting Goods business way back when. And the second best thing was losing the Dick's Sporting Goods, because it forced us to become a better agency, to be more diverse, to not be so reliant on just one client. So kind of fun that way.
A hard-won lesson, if you will, which makes a lot of sense. And I think, if there are people who might listen who, are going to start their own agencies or even just their own business, there are a few lessons that I think any entrepreneur learns the hard way over their time. So are there any that stick out in your head, beyond even the Dick's Sporting Goods example, of things in which you had to reinvent yourself or the agency, in the last however many, 35, 40 years?
Right, 40 plus.
Yeah.
But it's constantly evolving. So the ability to change with the times, like when I first got in the business, there was no internet. So it was in a lot of ways, it was a much easier business because we'd put out a message and it would be very hard for you to avoid us because there was only 3 TV stations, local radio stations. Now consumers have this choice. Now we want to have a dialogue with them, and we've had to evolve as an agency. We have job titles here, data analytics and SEO and all these kinds of things that absolutely never existed. I think in ways it's good and bad, probably more good than bad, but you've really had to evolve. The other things, for an entrepreneur starting out, the old joke is, hey, it only took me 10 years to become an overnight success. Is that it takes time, and everyone looks at a chart of, I'm going to just grow my business like this. But it's like this, and you have to be ready for the peaks and valleys, and you have to watch the, I say this a lot, but if you watch the pennies, the dollars tend to take care of themselves. And it's really important. And, hope is not a strategy. So you have to react, but you also have to be optimistic about the future and believe in the future. That's really important. And another thing, as we grew from, it started as a one-man shop with my dad, and then it was just Chris and me and my sister. So kind of smaller. And as we grew, the other thing that really learned was important is that culture basically trumps everything. That if you're to be a really good leader, I think you have to have a culture within your organization that's nourishing, challenging, I don't know, a whole lot of things, but it's got to be mostly really positive because you're trying to get people to work and go in a certain direction. And the wrong culture can just, a toxic culture is just awful. So I think we've always had a good culture. I think we've improved over the years and gotten better at it and really realized that, culture trumps process, strategy, all those kinds of things. Because if you got people working towards a goal who are aligned in what your mission and values and where your objectives are, then you've got a chance to make all those other things work really well.
I totally agree. And I've been here for, I believe, almost 8 years, February 1st, which went by very, very quickly. And even then, it was a good culture, but I feel like we took a turn maybe 6-ish years ago that went from good to great. And it's something we hear a lot, from people that we work with, and even clients notice that, we have a fair amount of balance and that we seem to like each other. And I do think that makes the work just that much better.
Absolutely agree. I will tell you, it's how 8 years it's pretty fast that it went by. And in your first year, I remember you reported to me.
I sure did.
As you did for, I think, I don't know, the first 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And in the first year, I was almost honest with you to a fault when I told you all the good, the bad, and the ugly about a family business and business overall. Your dad and my partner, Chris, was like, man, you're going to scare her.
You did. I cried. You did.
And I wasn't trying to scare you, but I wanted your eyes to be absolutely wide open.
Yes.
And not see the agency world through rose-colored glasses. Because I love the agency business, but it's not the easiest of things. And I love the family business,
Yeah.
but that's not the easiest of things either.
1,000%. And there are two pieces of advice you've given me over the years on those fronts. So from a family business perspective, you basically said you're going to be under a microscope. So you better be the first one here and the last one to leave, at least for the first few years until you have built up that respect. And pre-COVID, it was like you very much saw when people were in their seats, right?
Sure.
Now it's a little bit different now, but it was something I really took forward, and I was like, I don't want to give anybody an excuse to think, I'm little Miss Nepo baby over here who's not having to put her share of the work in. And then the other thing, just in terms of entrepreneurship and business, to your point about the peaks and the valleys, I think one valuable piece of advice you gave me over the years was to say very much so in the middle, right? Like you can get excited about the great stuff. You can be disappointed about the not so great stuff, but try as much as you can to be measured and hang out here, because if you let yourself go on that ride, ooh, it can be rough.
Right.
Rough.
You don't want to get too high. You don't want to get too low. It doesn't mean you can't celebrate those victories, but you have to be careful. And the other thing I know we've talked about is that not only for ownership, but also managers, people really look to us for cues. How are things going? It's like, your parents you always knew if your parents were fighting, right? So you knew if the owners were in disarray or in disagreement or whatever, and the managers, people watch them. So that's important to project the right image.
Of course. Now, when you were running the media and the account service team, right? So those were the departments that reported up through you, and new business, right? Of course. You always had very high expectations for your teams. You were very direct and honest about what you were looking for. And I feel like you have over the years have had some very, very strong relationships with clients that have carried through, into now. On the client services front, even if you're not, in that particular department, but you are a person who interfaces with clients, what do you think are the most important things to bring forward when you are building a relationship with a client, as a business owner or somebody who works at an agency?
Well, for both, I think it's kind of stupidly simple. Do they like you, and do they trust you? And by liking you, it's not like you have to be the best friends in the world.
Sure.
But you have to have mutual respect. There's a saying where we go, clients usually get what they deserve, which sounds kind of like a flip remark, but great clients will help you make their business better. They'll share lots of information. They'll be honest with you. They don't mind hurting your feelings. I hope they do it in a nice way, but they'll tell you. They won't let something stew.
Yeah, be direct.
They'll bring it up. Be direct. Have that kind of collaborative relationship that makes it work. And you should have fun working together. Hopefully that personal touch, it's a relationship business, and it really matters. And then the second part is, do they trust you? So you got to deliver the goods. You have to surround yourself with really smart, great people and give them what they want. So you know how that it's kind of a cliche expression. What's your superpower?
Sure.
And when I said, what would my superpower be? I think it involves hiring people who are smarter than I am, especially in the various disciplines that we work for our clients. So I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And you can't do it all. So I do think having really smart people that you trust and that your clients will trust and that they'll like is really important. So it's really simple. Do they like you, and do they trust you? It's a relationship business.
1,000%. I know one thing we always say is we want to be the best part of our clients' days.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that came from you originally too.
Our agency meeting with our clients should be their best meeting of the day, week, whatever, because we're the fun stuff.
Yeah, we're supposed to be, right?
Right.
And we do have there's a client I work really closely with. Whenever we get to do a creative assignment, which, we work in a number of different disciplines, but she's always like, this is the best. This is why I love marketing. This stuff is so fun to me. I love the puns. I love looking at the design portion, because, we work in a very creative field. It's interesting to see what everybody comes up with.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, so on the early days before we scaled up, right, we've been anywhere north of 50 people in the past. Right now, we're sitting at about 25 with 3 core competencies that we've been working on for the past 3 years. But at one point, you were actually copywriting for Dick's Sporting
Oh, sure.
Goods, right? So
We
can
did
you,
everything. Chris
yeah,
did. I mean, sometimes we were talent in the TV spots, all
yeah.
kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Can you talk a
Wore a
little
lot of
bit
hats.
about your favorite work over the years? Like, is there one example that sticks out to you as you had the most fun or it had the most impact?
The initial Terry Bradshaw campaign that we did really put not only Dick's Sporting Goods on the map, which was the primary goal, obviously, to get our client. They
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be a national big box retailer. And they were this great little regional but vendors like, yeah, we're out of Binghamton, New York, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So Terry really helped put them on the map. And I wrote a lot of that campaign along with John Munyon years ago. And that's when we first got real notoriety. And we went to New York to transfer the film,
Mm-hmm.
and we fly in there and back. And it's like, oh, we're like, Chris and I were looking at each other. We're like real ad guys now. And it really felt like we were getting there. And Dick's Sporting Goods is a very aggressive advertiser, so they like to spend money on media. So it was all over the place, and
Yeah.
they all knew we did it, and so that was really exciting.
Yeah.
That part,
That's awesome.
yeah, it was our coming out party in a way.
I love it. I love it. Well, um, I think I've asked you everything I had to ask, Kevin. Anything else in terms of advice for entrepreneurs, people who are in the agency world? Is there anything that you would want to share?
Well, I think for Flynn,
Mm-hmm.
I'm proud that we've stuck it out this long. To my recollection or knowledge, I believe we're the longest tenured agency in the Rochester market
Mm-hmm.
that's still continuing out there right now. And it's great to see a third generation in, and I'm hoping that it lasts. I mean, for me, real success would be that Flynn lives on way after I'm I'm gone. But
Mm-hmm.
so that part's exciting for me. Yeah, advice to entrepreneurs, you got to be optimistic, work your butt off, your tail off, but you got to make sure that you enjoy what you're doing. One of the
Mm-hmm.
coolest things about the agency business, at least for me, uh, was that clients are different. I have to learn so many different things.
Mm-hmm.
The omni-channel media stuff is so different, so you have to learn more about that. People are different. So it's really interesting because if you're a curious person, you know, you're going to learn a lot and you're always going to be learning throughout there. I remember Ray Martina would sometimes talk about, his mom goes, why can't you be a mailman like your uncle, whoever it was, Frankie? That's a very steady, certain job. Ray goes, and I agree with him. It's like, I'm going to do the same route every day, 5 days a week. It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That would be like torture. So I do love the idea that in the agency business that I got to learn so much, and I was excited about
Yeah. Well, thank you. You've also taught me a lot, and
it.
I hope to carry the legacy forward. And
You better.
I'm sure we're going to see you again. So thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.